Good day, good people. This is Heather Heteru, your personal change coach and village elder. I am here still doing our episodes around suicide and kind of a different look, a deeper dive into suicide. And again, one of the reasons that I'm sharing this information is to retool our community. We need to be aware. And we need to be able to have the tools to do something to change the trajectory of where suicide is taking our community and our families. We need to have people who have knowledge, who have a voice, who even have experience to help people navigate away from what we're calling today the instigators. Now, the instigators are, it shows up in a couple of different ways. I talk about the instigator being like a voice, not quite an inner voice, because it's not really inside of you. It's kind of like externally right at your ear, always in your ear, having something to say, trying to convince you to do something or try to push you deeper into a situation. And so I want to talk about it in a couple of different ways today. One, I say that we don't talk about it enough. The experience is happening all around us for multiple people in multiple ways. Children are not omitted from that. Our elders are not omitted from it. And people everywhere in every age in between. It's happening to us, through us, and around us. And we have to be able to be aware. Aware of the symptoms, aware of the challenges, aware of the tools. We need to increase our awareness in this area. And I take it very personally as one who is a thriver, meaning that I have survived the attempt. I died by suicide and came back to be a messenger to make sure that people knew that that is not the way to go. It is not the decision that you want to make. And so there are people who have this voice, and we have a perspective from multiple points of view. I'm sharing mine from that point of view. And this is not necessarily that it means it's everybody's experience, because it isn't. It is mine. And so I'm sharing my journey with you so that you have some insight, so you'll have some tools, so you'll have some the indicators to know what's happening, and also make everybody aware of the instigator. So today we're going to talk about how not enough people see their crisis as a suicidal crisis. And I found that out through some of the conversations that I've been having during the course of these episodes, and how people are responding to it, and the things that people want to know and they want to hear more about. So I'm shaping this journey and these conversations around what people are asking me or sharing feedback with me for. And so because I talked to a few people who have been in a crisis before, but they didn't see it as a suicidal crisis. Even though that's where they were, that's what they were dealing with. They still didn't see it as a suicidal crisis. So when the event passed over, they just went on with their lives. They never went back to getting the additional help to address whatever those issues were. They kept bearing it and suppressing it. And I call that one of the instigators too, because it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. That was yesterday. You don't have to deal with that ever again. Keep putting more things on top of it. Wounds don't heal because you stuff gauze in it. That's not what heals a wound. It just stops the bleeding from showing on the outside. If it's not healed, it's still going to be a wound. So I want you to understand that we have to focus on healing our wounds. They don't go away. They don't go away until they're healed. And so sometimes it takes longer to heal more deeper wounds than it does something that's maybe a shallow wound. It doesn't mean it's not important to heal it. It absolutely means it's important to heal it. The first step in healing is awareness, to know what it is, why is this happening to me? What am I going through? How am I responding to what I'm going through? All of these different dynamics kind of pour into leading up to a crisis, getting through a crisis, or getting help to navigate it. One of the things I love about being on earth at this time is that there's so many people here with so many answers, with so many experiences. While I am my own unique blueprint, there are people who share parts of my blueprint. So this journey for me around suicide and dying by suicide is a journey that unfortunately I share with several thousands of people. And I'll just say that in 2022, there were 49 or almost 50,000 people, Americans we're saying, 50,000 people in our country who died by suicide in just that 1 year. However, in the same year, 1.6 million people attempted. 1.6 million attempted and 50,000 achieved it. What is that saying to you? That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to share this journey with me. If you happen to be one of them and your number is just not recorded, can you imagine those that are not even recorded? If this is just what is recorded and what's been reported, this is still just a glimpse of what really is. And so we have to change what is to what we want it and need it to be. And we do that again through awareness first, making ourselves aware that we have these wounds, that deeper wounds often take more time to heal and more strategies to get that healing. I think that's an important perspective to gain because a lot of us feel like we're alone in this journey. We're alone in this crisis. And that's not the case. You're not alone. There are way too many of us on the planet, let alone in the country and the city and your family and your community. There are way too many of us that need each other. And we need to be able to hear each other's silent cries. That's often what we miss. And sometimes the instigator is involved in, oh no, they'll be all right. Nope, she's strong. Nope, he's got it all together. He's just grieving. He's just, at this point, we can't make those assumptions that everybody is going to be okay. And we can't necessarily walk away when people just say, I'm good. Especially if you start seeing the signs and the symptoms. Sometimes people withdraw. Sometimes people will share and laugh it off. I'm hurting and yes, I don't want to deal with this and I don't want to deal with this anymore, but I'm okay. I got it. What did you hear in that statement? Yeah, I don't want to be here anymore, but I'm okay. Some people will tell you the truth and say, I'm done. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. These are signs. These are silent cries for help, especially if you are a trusted friend or a trusted ally or a family member or a mentor. We have to be able to listen, and we have to be bold, and we have to be courageous in how we address those things, because people sometimes feel very alone. I felt very alone, and I have a very close family. And I didn't want to tell them because, one, I didn't want to burden them. I didn't want to burden them with my sorrow. I didn't want to bring anybody else down. I felt like I was strong enough to do it on my own, but I wasn't. I wasn't strong enough. That was my inner instigator saying, oh no, you got this. Now let me get you alone and let me get you here so I can tell you how really hurt you are. So I can tell you how really alone you are, because the two people who you love best or who you think love you, who would normally be with you through these things, who you trust, are no longer there. So not only are you by yourself, you'll never be with them again. Like, this is the instigator talking to my ear, telling me more negative things, taking me in more negative places, using my imagination against me. I want you to be aware of the instigators. The instigators are sometimes people who have a misperception about what they're seeing in you. Oh, you're strong, and not using it. And I'm not talking about people who use those terms as an affirmation. I'm saying that people who use that as an assumption. Because you appear to have everything together. You got to handle this too. That's not necessarily the case. That's not necessarily the case. We cannot use our assumptions and build expectations from them. We have to be mindful that everybody, and I mean physical body, changes every 24 hours. You lose hair, you lose cells, you lose memory cells. We're a different person every day. Some things are renewed every day. We say when we become a Christian that your mind has been renewed. There are some things that we still have to work through. There is some healing that's deeper that we have to work through. I want to share just a few more things with you. Just a little few stats that I've been pulling. So we think that a suicidal crisis starts from a long-term mental health crisis or mental health challenge. That's not necessarily true either. You can have a mental health challenge that never becomes a suicidal crisis, and vice versa. You can have a suicidal crisis that never was a mental health challenge before. So one of the things we have to do is we have to remove that mindset. We have to remove that mindset. One, that there's something wrong with me. These are life circumstances that we're facing. Some, like the wounds, are deeper than others. These are life circumstances. We're navigating life. And we're looking for ways to prolong our lives. We're looking for ways to prolong our lives and not lose it in the process. So the more we do mental wellness checks, let's check in. We go to the doctor for our physical wellness. We need to check in for our mental wellness. That's why we need therapists and counselors and people who are skilled at helping us navigate some of the deeper waters. The next level, you need to have a mentor. You need to have a confidant that brings wisdom, that brings experience, that brings understanding to you, so that you always have somewhere to go that's a trusted space. These are ways that we defeat the instigator, because those techniques do not allow you to isolate and stay isolated. That's one simple thing we can do for one another. When you see people withdrawing, when you know they're going through a crisis, this is our opportunity to jump in. Jump in and share. Jump in and cover them in prayer. Jump in, help navigate the waters, not muddy the waters by judgment, by using our expectations against somebody else's situation, and then expecting that somebody would respond the way you respond to situations. That becomes an instigator. Well, if it were me, I would have done this. If it were me, I would have said this. That's an instigator. It may not be intentional, but that's an instigator. We have to learn how to defeat the instigators. And so, some of the other things that I want you to know, that if everyone was diagnosed, everybody would have some type of diagnosis, whether it's physical or mental. That's where we have common ground. But that's our attempts at life to life. That's lifing it. And some of those are more challenging than others. Some of us have to work harder at lifing than others. Some of us have to work through deep-rooted issues that may be generational, that may be situational, that may even be environmental. Where you stay, where you live, where you grow up, where you went to school, where you go to church, where you play. Those are really called your social determinants, right? But it's important that you know that they affect you. If you are changing every day through taking in more information, we change that way too. Through experiences, we change that way too. And some things are so deep that you don't even want to say it out loud. But it's still happening with you, to you, through you, around you. What do? Where do you go? You first go for the professionals. If it's urgent and you're in that crisis, I want you to text 988. Especially if you feel you're in that suicidal crisis. 988. So I want you to get out of the small space that you're in, because statistics even show that when you're in a suicidal crisis, the worst thing you can do is isolate. Because the only thing, when you're in that space, the only thing that exists is really the 3 feet around you. Your world is much bigger than that 3 feet. Your world is much bigger than the space that you're in, the room that you're in, the house that you're in, the building that you're in. And because those decisions are mostly made in that split second, you can give up in that split second. The right call from the right person at the right time, the right visit from the right person at the right time. And that's all of us following that energetic pattern together. I'm feeling so-and-so. I feel like I need to call them, or I'm thinking about them. Call right away. Don't delay, because certain things exist on a frequency. Suicide itself has its own frequency. And we talked about this before, but suicide and depression are one frequency apart. So if you're feeling depression, and people, it's almost acceptable to say that you're depressed. Because people pretty much, they try to give you some positive words, but they step back and leave you alone. Because they feel you need a little time to yourself. But remember how close they are. Because if you are on this level, so let me break this down again. We talked about the difference between frequency and vibration. Frequency is where you are. Frequency is where you are, the level you're on. Vibration is how you feel when you're there. How you feel when you're there. So when those two line up, there's action taking place there. And until one or the other moves, you stay on that. And you stay on that for long periods of time. You start to take on the characteristics of those frequencies. That means if you're up and down, the potential for you to level out on that, and that's kind of where we jump off. When we're on the frequency of suicide and depression long enough. The way we start to feel while we're there makes a difference. So that's why that phone call from a friend, that visit, that card in the mail, why all of those dynamics are so important. Being kind to a stranger. Because that stranger may be the very one that needed that act of kindness at that moment. That's why it feels so strongly that you needed to say something to that person. or pay it forward and buy their lunch, or pay it forward and purchase something for them, gift them with something. These things are so super important. And when you're on the frequency of kindness and gratitude and peace, what goes with that? What are some of the things that you feel when you're being generous? You feel good about yourself. You feel good about the position to give. So more of that is attracted to you. It's a beautiful place to be. If we need an instigator, how about one in that category to keep you in that frequency for longer periods of time? Where is that instigator? The instigator for that is the law of attraction. The law of attraction, right? So when you look at this dynamic, we talk about the instigator as it relates to suicide. That means that the instigator lives on that frequency of suicide, on that frequency of depression. It's kind of always pulling depression. Come on, depression, be on this level. And depression sometimes give in and shifts from depression to suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts. Remember, it's two parts before action happens. It's how you feel while you're there. Not saying from time to time you don't pass through them, but you don't want to stay there. So, a couple other things I want to share with you before we go. I have lots of stats. I wanted to make sure that I gave you some other things to think about because I don't want people to think I'm the only one. I'm the only one having this experience. Nobody understands, and I don't want that to be your reason anymore. I do want to share with you. Okay, so for men in 2022, it says men die by suicide 3.85 times more than women. It said white males accounted for 68.4% of suicide in 2022. It also said in 2022 that 54.6% of all suicides were by firearms. So what does that mean? It means for those who have firearms, if most of us have some type of health challenge or mental health challenge, and they have access to firearms, the potential for them to use it against themselves is higher. And I wanted to share a little bit about someone and a member of my family who died by suicide. And I had a chance to talk to another family member that was with him when he died by suicide, when he pulled the trigger. What she said was that she felt that he had been already in that suicidal ideation space. His job pointed it out to him and told him that he couldn't come back to work until he got some help, some mental help. And he was kind of refusing to get that additional help because he felt that everybody he would go to was against him. And in that space between him going to get some help, like actually in the car, going to get some help, my cousin got in the car with him. And, this is a person, my cousin, both of these were my cousins, but one that went in to support. One of the things that everybody knows about her, she's very protective of her family. Like if you needed somebody to go to war with you, this is who you would take. And just that aspect of her kind of gives you that kind of strength to know that you have somebody that you can trust that would be there for you. And so she was the one that was actually there with him. in the car on their way to get some help. And she mentioned to me that during the course of them going to get the help, that he was pointing out that there were people that were a part of this conspiracy for him. And she said at one of the last stops that he got out of the car and went to the back of the car, which is where he had his firearm. And he took the firearm out of the car, out of the trunk. And she said she was looking in the rearview mirror and she could see him, and she saw him shoot himself in the head. And she said she didn't know what he pulled out of the trunk, but she said when she saw him, she actually made eye contact with him as she was looking, and she saw him pull the trigger, and she said it just happened so fast, and saw him fall to the ground. And I asked her how that affected her. And she says that there's not one day that goes by that she doesn't think of him and think of the incident. The other thing she said was that if she didn't have a strong mind, and she believes that her mind is strengthened through her beliefs in Christ and her belief in God, that every day she still would not be able to get through it. And it's been a few years. I want to say maybe 3 years or so. So I want to point out that part of that echo that you hear, or the thoughts that come up, and how visual that scene was to play out over and over again, and how the instigator can play on your mind and your thoughts. She said that it didn't happen to her that way because her mind was strong in her beliefs, and that's what keeps her. But she could still see that scene day after day. Years later, every day, she said, she sees that scene play over and over again. That's an echo. And we talked about the echoes too. And whether you were present or just closely related to the person, you sometimes still hear the echo. There's another woman that I met who had a daughter, and I was hoping to have all these guests speak, but everybody's not ready to have a conversation. So they gave me permission to say and share. But she lost a daughter of 13. And for her, it's just over a year. I believe it's just over a year now since her daughter's passing. And what she's done with the echo is to continue to help other parents of teenagers understand some of the challenges of teenagers, some of the signs, some of the things to be aware of that as adults we may not be aware of. So the idea is to make sure you continuously have new tools, starting with your awareness. It's so important to be aware. It's so important to have your toolbox of ongoing tools that can help you to be able to, to help you be able to just navigate and manage. So, I'm just going to take a quick break and take some water.
Are you an indie podcast or content creator looking to reach a wider audience? Look no further. Introducing Podcastic, the ultimate podcast network designed exclusively for indie creators like you. At Podcastic, we believe in the power of unique voices and fresh perspectives. We're here to amplify your passion and creativity, connecting you with a growing community of engaged listeners who crave original content. Podcastic is more than just a platform. It's a support system built for indie podcasters, offering a range of resources to help you succeed. From tailored promotional campaigns to professional production assistance, we're here to help you shine. Our intuitive platform makes it easy for you to be seen and heard. We do all the heavy lifting for you. You just show up and create. Plus, with our advanced analytics, you'll gain valuable insights into your audience's preferences, allowing you to refine your content and grow your fan base. Ignite your passion, expand your reach, and thrive with podcasting. Visit our website at www.podcasticlife.com to get started. Podcasting, the home for indie podcast and content creators.
Thank you for giving me that brief moment to pull myself together. This is pretty heavy content. Let me tell you, this is pretty heavy content. It's not easy to bring this part of my life to the forefront, but I would rather carry an understanding of knowing that I shared the tools instead of kept them and try to live in the shame or hide the dark part of my journey. It's not helping anybody to hide. And I hope other people who may have experienced this practice or this mindset or this chapter in your life, that you also have the courage to talk about it, share as you're healing those deeper wounds. Because we can't help our community and we can't help people not repeat it if they don't know that this is a part of the challenge. I want you to know that you have a choice. You can decide that this is not what you want to do, and this is not the frequency you want to live on. And remember, as we look at frequencies, we're talking about for moments in time. Moments in time. The longer you stay there, the more dangerous that frequency is for you, because now you have the feelings that go along with it. And we want to make sure that we continue to elevate beyond the frequency of depression and the frequency of suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideations. Suicidal thoughts and ideation can also show up in behaviors. It shows up in the use of drugs. It shows up in promiscuous behavior. That also is suicidal ideation, because the chances that you're taking with unprotected sex increases your, not just increases your risk of sexually transmitted diseases, some that are deadly, but it also increases the energy that you're sending from one person to another. You don't know you may not know enough about their backstory, but if it's Jim and James and Jonathan, and if you are in those spaces, it's still drawing in their energy too. So if any of them have suicidal ideation, if any of them have the types of behaviors or values, you're taking that in too. So there's a lot to think about, and we don't necessarily see that as risky behavior. We just think of it as having fun. And we typically think like that as we're younger, because we feel we have a lifetime ahead. And even in our elder community, STDs and even deadly STDs are still being passed around. And they're passing at higher rates. You may not hear that person passed away because they had a sexually transmitted disease, but they are leaving us in rapid numbers. So it's important to recognize that. And again, we're talking about the frequency and what you feel when you're on that frequency. So I want to make sure that you have that in mind, and a couple other things. So the last three I want to talk about is a stat that says 1 in 5 people have suicidal thoughts. 1 in 14 people have self-harm or done self-harm. And then 1 in 15 people have made suicidal attempts. That reduces the picture a little bit. So you say 15 people, say that's at a family barbecue. So at least one in those 15 people at that family barbecue have made a suicide attempt. When you think of 1 in 14 people, same thing. 1 in 5 people, that's likely at your dinner table. 1 in 5 people have had suicidal thoughts. So when you look at the numbers through that lens, it's a little more real. It's a little more close to home. And so that means we have to have more tools more close to home. And we have to be aware. So our goal is to make sure that we continue to grow in this area, continue to recognize the signs and the symptoms, and then the first thing we can do is just be kind. Just be kind. And as we're moving deeper in relationships through our family, and we know that people might be going through different stressors. Divorce is a major stressor. It's a major kick up in that suicidal thoughts and that suicidal ideation. It's a huge number. It's a huge number. And you can get so caught. This is also where I was. You can get so caught in the reasons that it happened, or your knowledge of what really happened or didn't, that it can become debilitating. Meaning that it could paralyze you, and you don't even want to get up out of the bed. It's difficult to just get up out of the bed and keep going for the day. When you have family, friends, and loved ones who are in that space, you can't let up. You can't let up. You can give them a day or two, but don't let people isolate for more than a day or two. That means isolate from your phone calls. If they stop answering your phone calls, you need to make a visit. You need to pay a visit. Another thing that you can do is take flowers or plant. If you don't like the fact that flowers die after a few days and you think the person may respond to that, then take a plant. A hardy, hefty plant that, as a survivor, like you are and like they are. It seems like such a small thing, but it's a huge measure in how you feel about somebody, that you take the time to do it. And people need that constant reminder that they're cared about, that you want them to be here, that you want them to get through this, and that they don't have to get through it alone. Trust is a huge factor with suicidal ideation. Feeling like you're a burden is another area where it's really important. So I want to leave you with I found a study that talked about why talking about suicide and suicidal ideation is difficult. So I'm going to give you the 7 reasons that they came up with. Number 1, it says, people say unhelpful things. People say unhelpful things. And what do we mean by that? It says, you'll be fine. Don't be silly. Chin up. There's nothing wrong in your life. Why do you feel like that? So saying things like that is not helpful to someone who's going through. Like, well, you look like you got it all together. Don't worry about it. It'll go away. Things like that are not helpful to hear when you're in that space. It's not helpful to hear. Number 2, I don't have any friends that I can speak to. I don't have any friends. And what they're saying is that there's nobody who I've trusted long enough to trust with this. And the other part of that, the next one is, I don't want to burden others. That's the third thing. I don't want to burden others. I don't want to bring anybody else down. I don't want to make anybody else feel the way I feel. And we have to assure people that that's not the case. The fourth one is not what people want to hear. Of course, nobody wants to hear about somebody dying by suicide or thinking about dying by suicide. But the reality is that is what it is. So whether people want to hear it or not, we have to still talk about it. We have to find ways to talk about it. The next one, there's a lack of empathy. It seems like people don't care one way or the other. And that may be true with a small number of people, but most people care. Nobody wants to hear that somebody is dying by suicide, thinking about dying by suicide. Nobody wants to really hear that. It's not what you want to hear, but people do empathize when they do hear it. Oh, no, especially when we know our children, ages 5 to 11, are dying by suicide, our boys. 5 to 11. Nobody wants to hear that. That's why we did a campaign to raise the awareness, because if you're not aware, then it's nothing, you don't have the tools because you don't think it's something real. Or the other thing is it doesn't happen in our community. That's not something that happens in the Black community. So we don't talk about it. And that's not true. Number 6 is I'm ashamed. And I like I said, as a thriver, I feel that. I carry that. But I also carry that was a chapter in my life. For me, over 20, 25 years ago. It's a chapter in my life, but it still happened. Did I learn from it? Yes. Would I go back to it? No. I know that I have an appointed time, and I don't have to rush it. I have more life to life. I'm going to continue to live my life to the fullest every day. And if I can help others to do that, to stay here, to be a part of the process, I'm going to continue to do that. And the last one, people don't have the skills to listen. Do we really know how to listen? Are we listening to say something? Are we listening to learn something? Are we listening to grow? It should be all of that. Not just one, but all. Because that's how we process. We have to learn how to listen with intention. When someone is sharing, when someone needs to share, listen. You don't have to try to solve their problem. But in building trust, it's having somebody that can just listen. You don't have to agree or disagree. Just listen. Let me share. Let me tell you what's on my mind. Let me get these thoughts out of my own mind. What's important, I think, where people start to misunderstand listening skills, especially when it's something that you might hear that's negative, is you don't have to take on other people's burdens either. You can listen with intention, but the intention doesn't have to be that you're going to take on their burden. What you listen for is how you use your tools. You may not be skilled to do it, but then you have help. You can call the 988 line too. Our crisis can be avoided. Our crisis can be moved through. We just don't have to do it alone. But if you happen to be, get out of isolation. That's another key, because that isolation makes your world so small that you feel insignificant in it. And that's not true. So we need for you to get out of isolation and feel how big the world is and how much you're needed in it. So this is Heather Heteru, your village elder, personal change coach. I hope it was something in what I said today that will help retool you in your toolbox, that will help you encourage someone who needs the encouragement, and most of all, that you don't isolate and don't allow someone else to isolate. Thank you for listening. Stay clear.